For Insight, we're joined by the author of the Senate property tax plan, Republican State Senator Paul Bettencourt of Houston. Senator, welcome onto State of Texas.
Thank you.
So we've heard the governor call for a plan to use all of the money that's set aside for property tax relief and use it to lower school property taxes. Your plan, however, uses some of that money to also raise the homestead exemptions. Why do you think your plan is better than what the governor wants and is proposing?
Well, first off, the Senate plan is a record. It's $18 billion of tax relief going straight into school taxpayers across the state. The homestead exemption is a key component of it because it lowers the tax bills for 5.72 million homeowners. And there's also a whole bunch of compression and then what we call a collection limit for how much it can be raised in the future. Now, the result is a eye-popping savings for homeowners of first year of $1,270. That's over $1,000. And if you're over 65, that number actually is closer to $1,450, and it goes up from there. So when you look at how much bang for the buck you get as a tax writer by using a homestead exemption for homeowners, there's just no comparison to a $100,000 homestead exemption. It's just off the charts and eye-popping, and it's great news for taxpayers across the state because I believe they would vote for that over 85%.
So, Senator, the original plan at the beginning of session was to spend about half of our historic $33 billion surplus to spend on property tax relief. It has now grown to even more of that. I believe your bill is about $18 billion. But the concerns that have surrounded both of these plans are all about sustainability. How do we make sure that we can spend that much on property tax relief in a session when, say, we don't have this historic surplus?
Well, there's two things that are part of the plan. One, there's money that's already been set aside from 2019, and these are blockbuster bills. I was the author of one that passed back then that made fundamental changes in how much people pay for cities, counties, and school districts on their property tax bills. Those bills have already saved well over $10 billion because as values go up, tax rates come down, and that keeps the bill down. And in fact, for Houston, Austin, and San Antonio, last year's combined tax bill, even with the moonshot appraisals that occurred in Travis County, was actually down. Now, when we take $18 billion, which is a little bit up from where it was, and you apply that across the board, that means everybody's tax bills in the state will be down wherever they are on average. And to sustainability, that's why the Senate plan, we've always had a homestead exemption component to let the public vote them that increase, because then that becomes part of the Constitution, and that means that's a priority that has to stay funded really in perpetuity. So about half the savings that I've talked about, $1,270 all the way up to nearly $1,500, depending upon first year, second year, under 65, over 65, disabled, et cetera. That comes from that large homestead exemption increase. That's why it needs to be voted on by the public, and the public will overwhelmingly approve it, just like they did the last two of my proposals in May a year ago.
Yeah, the public has approved homestead exemption increases before. So has the Senate. But so far, the plans this session haven't made many inroads with the House or with the governor's office. Can you give us some insight into the latest status of the negotiations? Are we any closer to a compromise this week?
Well, there was a lot of discussion over the weekend and proposals, which I had hoped would have already cut a deal for everyone. Unfortunately, they did not. So what the Senate did was take all the good ideas that we had, which was the homestead exemption, the compression, lowering the rate of growth of everyone's tax bills to 1.75% on school taxes all across the state, and then adding some new items back in, like the franchise tax reduction to get 67,000 businesses out of paying franchise tax. Oh, but wait, there's more. We're going to say for 1.7 million filers, they just don't have to file that they owe zero tax on franchise tax anymore. So we put all these together in a big bill and sent it to the House. Now, unfortunately, the House has decided not to come back after, for now, this is almost the better part of 3.5 weeks. in the special session. But we've had tremendously positive response to the Senate plan across the state because it's a win-win-win it's not only a win for taxpayers, but it's a win for the school districts, because part of the plan is when you pay a homestead exemption, the schools get to get a piece of the debt rate that was being paid by the homestead exemption itself. So they actually have a benefit of $642 million. So homes, businesses, schools, everybody wins in the Senate plan, and that's why I call it a win-win-win.
Senator, you just mentioned that the House left on what was essentially the first day of this first special session, complicating negotiations between both of the chambers. We just heard from Representative Dustin Burrows, a Republican from Lubbock. He is proposing a tax assessment increase limit, essentially proposing a 7.5 cap on annual increases to individuals' property tax bills. What do you make of that?
Well, the problem with just looking at one portion of a tax bill, if this indeed is an appraisal cap, I have not read it directly yet. If that is, then you miss how people get levied, which is their value times the rate equals the bill they pay. Or for a big jurisdiction like a school district, it's the sum of everybody's values times the rate equals the levy. And what the Senate plan does is controls government spending in total by jurisdiction, and specifically by 1,100 ISDs. And actually, we're reducing that limit. So that means no matter what happens to your assessment, if the assessment goes up, tax rates will come back down, and there will be a very modest 1.75% increase over on everybody's bills in a school district, all 1,100 school districts all across the state. So a rollback rate reduction is by far the most superior and best method of reducing taxes long-term than worrying specifically about an appraisal or about a tax rate.
Certainly will be interesting to hear what the governor thinks of that as well. Speaking of which, he vetoed several bills that you either authored or sponsored in this regular session. Lieutenant Governor Dan Patrick said that it was a retaliation for your tax cut plans that Governor Abbott, of course, is not the biggest fan of. Do you agree with that sentiment, and where do those bills go from here?
Well, I had 3 Senate bills that were vetoed. There were actually people in the Senate chamber that sadly had 4, 5, and 6 Senate bills vetoed. Now, one bill that I was very disappointed was a crackdown on crime that was brought by the Dallas County District Attorney's Office, that basically criminal rings were bringing up fuel trucks and basically plugging into fuel operations from department stores all the way down to gas stations, sucking the tanks dry, and then they were using specialized electronic equipment. So we had a bill that was going to crack down on that. It passed the Senate unanimously, passed out of the House 142-4, and that was vetoed. And law enforcement and the DA's office up there are unhappy about that as well as I am. None of those vetoes of bills that had nothing to do with this debate that's ongoing really made any difference in the offers that were exchanged over the weekend, or obviously that the new Senate bill that was passed unanimously by the Senate. And I think the precedent of having a veto for a future action is unprecedented.
Senator, I think, some people watching from the outside see a state where Republicans are in control of everything and think, they should be able to figure this out. They had all session to work on a property tax compromise. That was the #1 promise that we heard from many Republicans on the campaign trail. So what is your message to those constituents who might see some of this infighting going on and think, well, this seems a little disorganized?
Where's our tax cut?
Well, and that's a great question. And look, in the special session, the Senate passed a bill the first day, and we have stayed in session, and we've taken many other actions. You all have covered it. Unfortunately, the House passed their version, then quit. It was called sine die. Now, it's very difficult to negotiate by telephone, but we've been doing our best from the Senate. And what we did this week was pass another version of all the best ideas that we saw and passed it unanimously. Had a press conference, asked for the House to come back to work, which still hasn't happened yet. So it takes, unfortunately, two chambers, both the upper chamber and the lower chamber, to pass a bill and send it to the governor. And so we'll wait for that to occur, because these good ideas stand for themselves. My tweet about this at Team Bettencourt went to 132,000 people, which is astonishing. I've never had a tweet go that far in my life. So people are really interested in this. The homestead exemption is a very important point of this, because you don't pay. See, the most powerful thing I can do as a tax writer is say, don't pay, and that's an exemption, or a rollback rate reduction, or franchise tax doubling, so 67,000 business owners don't pay. That's the way to go. Okay. And importantly, I hope that message gets through to my House colleagues and they come back and they take the bill up.
Well, Senator, it seems like it's going to be a long, hot summer at the legislature. The Senate now adjourned until Tuesday, the last day of the first special. So it seems like we're going into special number 2. Is that your assessment?
Well, look, I never try to, predetermine what the governor will do. That's up to him. But the Senate has put a great tax bill out for the public. Lieutenant Governor Patrick supports it strongly. We've been getting just fabulous response from all parts of the state because it has a fantastic homestead exemption of $100,000. It's got, tax relief in the form of tax compression and franchise tax relief. It's got limitations on the growth of government so that future tax bills for for school districts won't go up more than 1.75%. And when you sum all that together, you get a fantastic plan for the public, and we've been getting nothing but positive responses. So I hope that that what we pass says something. See, we've stayed and worked. We've stayed and worked to come up with the best possible tax plan, and that's what you have to do. And then once it passes, you've got to go listen to the public. And this is a huge extension over what's already worked last year in Houston, Austin, and San Antonio. And $18 billion is a record number. In fact, Lieutenant Governor Patrick says it is a worldwide record. And it's bipartisan. All the Republicans, all the Democrats support this plan in the Senate. So I hope that the plan speaks for itself. And you can see all of it at on my social media and get more details because I don't think we leave any taxpayer behind.
All right, let's get more viral tweets for you, Senator. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks, Senator.
Right. Let's all do this. Live long and prosper. We'll see you.
Thanks, Senator Bettencourt.